Hi, you're listening to Young Leaders Podcast, a show that inspires creatives and motivates you to make a meaningful impact in the world. My name is Filippo Bagarella, and I'll be your guide to success as we interview young leaders, selfishly asking them about their progress and the lessons in life they've learned so far. Because if they can do it, you can do it. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Charlotte Koonce.
Yeah.
Hi!
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being in the show.
Thanks for having me.
We
This is
appreciate
cool.
it. I will start with the first question I ask everybody,
Okay.
and that is, what is your definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership, I think it is an awareness of the ecosystem with which you live and are part of, and all the players and components of that ecosystem, like what makes everyone thrive, what makes people happy, what brings people down. Because in a community, one person's failure ends up having that ripple effect, and bringing, at least in like a healthy community, it ends up bringing others down as well. And so, in order to strengthen that ecosystem in a community, uplifting people selflessly, and choosing when to be selfish in order to help, those people that you live with. That is how I would define leadership, I think. It's uplifting others, uplifting yourself so that you can better uplift others. That's like I think my grand idea of leadership. I think in the context of something like a school or like, for example, a community of composers, it's like talking and smiling, listening to their music, for example, going to concerts, supporting people, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so in a way, you are trying to tell me that leadership is basically creating a sense of community where
Yes.
everybody's at the same level and everybody listens to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, well, tell me, you are a composer.
Yes.
How did you get into composition?
Composition. How did I get into it as like a informal practice, or how did I decide to pursue it?
In a way, how did you start at the very beginning?
Well, when I was a kid, I took violin lessons and then later piano lessons, and I didn't want to practice anything. I just liked making it up as I went along. And like I'd like to listen to something and then think I could play it on the piano and like, hey, listen to this. It's that song that we just heard. It probably didn't sound much like those songs that I was trying to replicate, but I thought that was so much fun, being able to pick out a tune and then recreate it. And then, the practice of improv comes from that kind of oral lens on performance. And so then I would start making stuff up, harmonizing. I first remember harmonizing, like starting to sing along to songs in the car, like when I was like 8 or 9.
Very young age.
Oh my gosh, because it was so much fun. And also at that time, I thought my voice was dropping. In my head, I was like, I can't sing these high notes anymore, but I can sing this like nice harmony, and I still sound fabulous on this, And then from there, when I got my first school computer with Audacity on it,
Yeah.
I would like sit in the closet in my room and sing like the one that got away with like 8 different like vocal layers
And create
stuff
your own
like
choir.
that. Yeah, exactly.
We used to do that in high school. It was a requirement for
Oh,
us.
really?
But it actually made me understand that you can produce anything you
Oh
want.
my gosh, anything you
It's
want.
literally, and it wasn't with Audacity. I think it was with Reaper,
Yeah,
which is basically like Audacity, but a little bit more
yeah,
advanced in a way.
yeah. Audacity was like the built-in one, and I found it and saw that you could layer tracks, and I was like, oh my gosh, I never needed to play an instrument again because I can layer my voice 1,000 times, and it's a song. It's an a cappella arrangement.
And that's how this brings me to a new topic. Basically, You wrote this beautiful piece that I want you to talk about,
Thank you.
and I don't want to actually talk me much about it. I want you to tell me about the latest piece that Lanji has played.
Okay. Open Ears.
Yes.
Okay. Open Ears was.
Which, by the way, is not was written way before you got here at Lanji.
Yeah. I mean, I started it in the summer of 2020, which, I mean, I don't need to explain any of that, but I was looking for the joy and like things, okay, and just shocked by the beauty of nature, like just so like, wow, this tree, this landscape, not landscape, but this environment is really speaking to me, and it is beautiful, and I don't want to sit on my computer any longer. I just want to sit here and stare at like these blades of grass. I know that sounds crazy, but like,
No.
that is,
Sounds kind of peaceful, actually.
yeah,
I
so
kind of want to be there
peaceful.
now.
And so I started writing poems, and this poem that I came across that I ended up writing down was, rise and receive the morning, toes warming through the dew, listen when the trees murmur that they get scared too, which people have made fun of me for, and I'm like, okay, I don't care. Paint me with understanding, color wisdom true, draft a simple outline as your teachers painted you. Sunshine fades with a gentle dim demise, stars adorn the fields as darkness strains the skies. And that was kind of like, okay, everything is so hectic and crazy, and this complex world that we've built for ourselves, like school, network, online, job, all of this stuff that suddenly had to stop in that time, that suddenly was frozen. Like the simple beauty of a day and the feelings that you have for other people and the place that you are. The simplicity of that and like the complexity of it too at the same time, like how we are a part of something so much bigger than us, was so powerful to me. And so then, as composers do, I started scoring that for first just two singers and then a choir, and then I wanted strings. And the poem itself, I don't have a lot of confidence in my ability to write poems or lyrics or anything like that. But then I was introduced, and like the trees part, for example, people thought was crazy. And I was like, that's kind of weird that I just wrote that. I don't know. But then I was reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she has this quote in it that says, listening, standing witness creates an opening. I got that quote wrong. Can I look it up?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
And I have two quotes that I want to bring up about
Yes, please.
Robin Wall. Listening, standing, witness. Da-da-da. Okay. Robin Wall Kimmerer says, listening, standing witness creates an opening to the world in which the boundaries between us can dissolve in a raindrop. And that validated everything I'd been thinking about listening and how just being there in the woods, there's something that you can't really articulate about the way it makes you feel, the things it makes you notice. And I had no other way to say that except for listen when the trees murmur that they get scared too, because they were pointing to all of these things that, again, I can't articulate. Another hero of mine, John Luther Adams, at his talk this week at Radcliffe Institute, said something very similar. He was talking about how out of all the senses, listening is his deepest connection with the earth, and how it is just something spiritual to the point that he can't even articulate. Like it's touching air. Like sound is like you're touching air. Yeah. Yeah. And so that inspired that piece. There's another quote by Robin Wall Kimmerer that I think is beautiful because it explains that feeling of like, oh my gosh, okay, I was spending all this time sitting in like the forest near my home, like so grateful to be there and really leaning into like, this is the landscape, like this is my place. This land is like, I mean, obviously
Where you
we all live
belong.
on stolen land. Like we do all live on stolen land. And so that is like, Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about that a lot. And so it is not my land, but is the place where I was born, the place where I was raised. She says, action on behalf of life transforms because the relationship between self and the world is reciprocal. It is not a question of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting. As we work to heal the earth heals us. And so the moment that like I tuned my ears to that the place that I loved and started getting angry about things like seeing garbage in it, or someone wants to cut down their tree and plant a non-native species because it doesn't work in their lawn or something like that, that feeling of like injustice that grew inside me as I was noticing these things, it makes sense that the creativity would flow through the piece that I'd written for the world, because it becomes a reciprocal kind of relationship.
Something that a lot of people don't understand about musicians, but artists in general.
Yeah.
So singers, composers, writers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literary writers.
Yeah. Like yourself.
It's it's that most of the times behind that page, there is a world that is really difficult to comprehend. Yeah. Because you can try to explain it through music, through words, through notes, but I am a firm believer that music is just a way of getting there, and there are many ways to get there.
Yeah.
But getting there is is the main requirement, or achievement.
Yeah.
Understanding the story behind a piece, and unfortunately, that is missing in music in general, because not everybody, when they go to a concert and they listen to whether it be a Beethoven symphony or your piece,
Yeah.
or a piece from our professors, they don't understand that there's a story behind them. We
Yeah.
don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to connect the dots here. I'm trying to understand if there is a way to connect this ideal of music as a form of traveling to the story that
Yeah.
they're trying to convey, to actually getting there.
Yeah. I will say, as a default, like even if you have no context for what the story is, listening to a piece, the action of listening deeply ends up, like, no matter if you know the story or not, if you are listening in a way where you can surrender yourself and just listen, that is a form of like transcending ego and all of that stuff, all of your influences and all of your biases. And just like it's a meditative thing to be able to deeply listen to a piece. And that in itself is beneficial for everybody involved, like for musicians, because then you have people moved who really, really listen deeply. And you yourself as a listener has had the experience of getting to step outside of themselves for a minute. And so that, I think that's one of my favorite things about music, is that experience, if you can drop all your biases when you're listening to something and just surrender yourself to that sound, then that is that's an experience that's going to move you regardless. But when it comes to story, music, I mean, as we see with media and all of that, all media composition, and also music in the form of like a benefit concert or something. Music is a very powerful tool when paired with other things as well. And like for my score for this, I painted a bunch of paintings because I wanted my singers and my players to see that world that I was like. It's just a double visualizer, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Art, I mean, separate art forms are so powerful as it is.
Art is art.
Together,
art is art.
it's like, whoo.
It doesn't matter what type of art.
Yeah.
But
Art is art.
one step back, you said something extremely interesting that I want to go back to.
Yeah.
The art of listening. And that is not just in music. That is in everything.
Yeah.
Listening to your partner, listening to your friends, listening to yourself. Yeah. And this brings me also to like mental health, which is something that we try to talk about in the podcast. I say this every time.
Happy to talk about it.
But in music, unfortunately, just like in sports, mental health isn't always considered as much as the performance, as much as the glamour and all that.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do you cope with sometimes the pressure of having to get things done? I mean, just last week you were having like 2-3 projects you had to get done, and you got, I think, like 2 out of 3 or something like that, because you did everything you could.
Yeah.
Working like night in and like day and night.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
There's something about like creative people and their gravitation towards nighttime work that is so destructive, but it feels so good in the moment. And I think that leads to a lot of like, you know, later panic. But that's a whole nother topic. Like that night, 24 hours, like I've been working on this project for legitimately 17 hours. I could prove it to you. I have the receipts type feeling. But that's separate, so we'll get back to that. So I struggle a lot with mobilizing, like activating, like getting up in the morning.
Because you're procrastinating.
Procrastinating.
I'm a procrastinator.
I am a really big procrastinator, but it's funny, now that I get to do only music, I don't procrastinate as much. It just takes me a long time.
To get it done.
Yeah, to get it done. It takes a long time, but I'm so much more excited to do it than I used to be when I was writing papers and things. But music takes a long time, and those hours just disappear. They just go by because they're not bad hours. I'm not agonizing over the work, but it does take
Time flies.
hours. It takes hours. The same way that when I was sitting in my closet as a kid making those recordings, it would suddenly be midnight, like 3 hours past my bedtime or whatever. Like good hours, good happy hours, but they go by so fast. And then losing sleep and all that kind of stuff, and just like I have a lot of trouble mobilizing. And something that helps me a lot, because I'll go through weeks of just like bad, can't get out of bed, can't go to class, like build up these mental blocks.
Same.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good.
Because you feel like, you know, you can actually do it, but you just like, you tell yourself, you organize your day saying, I'm not going to do that. And even though you can actually do that, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
It's scary.
It is scary.
Because you just have to think it once, and then
Yeah.
it's blocked there.
Yeah. Sometimes the opposite happens to me, where I'll have something that's on my to-do list every day, and then my eyes glaze over it every day because I have a mental thing that's so deep. Like, I was supposed to get my passport last November, and it was on the top of when I make to-do lists. It was on the top of my to-do list. I got my passport, like, I went to the passport office, like, last week. Because it's just one of those things that's like, oh my gosh. I put it off for so long. Like, it stressed me out to think about it, so I was like,
I'm literally the same with emails.
Yeah,
especially, like, important emails. The more important they are, the less response they'll get.
Seriously. And that's why those moments of waking up or having, like, an idea, like, I need to respond to this now, they're so precious because they're so fleeting. And if you don't follow up with it, then it's not going to happen. Anyway, what helps me to activate and to get me out of those dark funks is practicing gratitude no matter how hard it is.
And how do you do that?
I like verbalize, I say, I am so grateful to be in the place I am with the people that I'm with, doing the thing that I love most. Like the fact that we are here, able to make music every day, um, is just so incredible. It is so incredible because by default, like we have the tools now to to make to have to make positive change.
Yes.
To make positive change.
An impact.
An impact. Another thing John Luther Adams said last week was, you think about the history of the world, and all the bad. I used to want to be a politician, and all the bad.
I
the
honestly could see you as a politician.
Thank you. I could see
would.
you as a politician.
Madam President.
No, I could not.
What would you want to be then?
Well, I used to want to do EPA or something, but
Oh.
it's rigged. It's all rigged. Anyway, all the bad stuff. You think about the war, the devastation, the bad stuff in history. That's politics, and it's the business of power. Like that's the history of power. And then you think about art, and it is all the good things in history, like all of the art imitates life, right? It's like this
It's a mirror
subtle,
of life.
yeah, and it's reciprocal too.
Yes.
It makes a lot of positive change, and it shows us the bad, and it's a record of history that is good and it's beautiful, and it continues. It has a legacy in itself, but it's powerful and it changes people's lives. And so the fact that we get to wake up every day and say, I'm making music today, and I might have to respond to some emails, like maybe look at the bills I got in the mail, but other than that, like, I'm in the business of I hate that I just called it a business, but like,
It is an industry, though.
Yeah, it is. But like, I spend my days making music, and that gratitude can propel me out of those funks in, an hour or 3 days. But gratitude.
So what keeps you sane? What you're trying to tell me is correct me if I'm wrong, but music keeps you sane.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. And the gratitude for the people in my life who have made it possible for me to do music and have pushed me in that direction. And like, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what
teachers. Sorry.
No, yeah. What I also want to talk about is, how do you think as a person, not necessarily as a composer, which implies anyways as a composer, how do you see yourself giving back in the future? Because a composer like you can easily teach, can easily write music for a movie, can easily write a symphony for, I don't know, for an orchestra. Like, what are you aiming to achieve?
Well, in terms of giving back to the people, places, times and spaces that have like
That's amazing.
that have got me to where I am now, and like will continue to help me as I go. I think a great way to give back is to be the best person you can be first and foremost, to thank people, and third, hopefully I can like one day repay my mom, like give her a nice
We spoke
check.
about that
Yeah,
last
we did.
time.
Like the feeling.
1M, just
Yeah.
$1 million for them.
Here, family, I love you. Thank you for
Thank
everything.
you for helping out.
Exactly. And that's a very powerful gift. Actually, let's speak it into existence. I'm so excited to repay my family for all the things actually.
Manifest.
Manifest.
Exactly.
But also, we're making music now. Making music that is filled with, like, gratitude. And I think making music that is true to you. Like, I always feel proud showing my grandparents the works that aren't... Like, I used to write things that were kind of full of bitterness. Like I had one or two pieces that I felt were charged with bitterness, and I didn't want to show anyone those.
Because you were afraid it would...
I just felt ashamed. Like it was an inside feeling of like, wow, this wasn't art that came from a good place in me. And I feel very excited to show them the works that I feel are charged with love and respect and honoring someone else that I think is good, for example. I don't know. In terms of like giving back to teachers and stuff, I think the same, like doing the best I can at all times without obviously overspending any kind of energy.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want to end up doing, but that's what I think is cool about this place, is like having an open imagination, as we've talked about in the past few weeks, will literally take you anywhere. Like
Open mind.
Open mind, yeah. And a lot of musicians have really non-linear careers.
Yeah.
And like some of my heroes with that are people like Donald Glover, for example, who does soundtracks and stuff. Actually, I don't know if he actually does. He has classical music. Classical. Okay, I'm starting this conversation.
Question. No,
Yeah.
no, exactly.
Okay.
Let's start this conversation. I had this conversation with the previous person I interviewed.
Yeah.
There's this misconception, and I want to see what you think about this. There's this misconception that if you enter in classical music, somehow you're not going to be accepted or taken as seriously if you don't pursue classical music. Example, when I started playing seriously in classical music, I specialized mostly in symphonies and orchestra playing. When I liked playing Lady Gaga, Michael Jackson, I was frowned upon.
Really?
Because they thought that was inappropriate. They thought that wasn't music. They thought that was just a way to work your way through excuses to make something more simple but make it greater.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that, and then I want to know what you think. I believe that music is a constant evolution.
Yeah.
And I caught myself again in this problem, and you heard me in class of film scoring.
Yeah.
I'm not enough open-minded to say that I got there, because, music that's composed now, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I really don't.
New music?
Because I still have, new music. Because I still have these roots in me that I'm trying to extrapolate still. That's really difficult. What's your way of?
It is difficult. I most of my influence. I'm not classically trained in anything. Like I'm about 6 years into classical composition training, but my roots are very much popular music, like 100% pop, rock, hip hop, all of that kind of stuff. And then I was like in the school orchestra until I was a freshman in high school and that kind of stuff. Then I joined choirs, one of which where we sang like pop songs and stuff. And then in college, I was in chorus for 2 semesters, but I was mostly working on like my a cappella group, arranging Billie Eilish and stuff like that. And so
that must have been really nice.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun. And music in informal settings is, I think, like when I am the most truly happy. It's like just hanging out but singing. Like, whoa, could you
doing
imagine?
It well but chilling.
Yeah. And there's like beauty in your ears. You look around, you see the people that you love. It's crazy.
Yes.
It's crazy.
That's a vibe.
It is a vibe.
That's a vibe.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
It really is. And so in terms of like the canon, for example, I have so much catching up to do, and I've been listening to all these symphonies that everyone knows, and people will say like, "Are you familiar with this piece?" And everyone in the class will be like, "Oh yeah," and I'm like writing it down, like maybe I'll give it a listen.
Common knowledge.
Yeah, now my common knowledge. But I feel really lucky to have that advantage. It's not an advantage at all. It's a disadvantage. I feel lucky to have that disadvantage because, I'm studying hard. And I think that new music is really interesting because I understand the function of popular music to the best of my ability. It shapes listeners. It's the soundscapes of their lives, their childhood. If they're not, a classical violinist, for example, like it is those. Well, no, but if Michael Jackson shaped the way that you think and hear, then that is just as powerful.
Yes.
Because, that is what keeps people returning over and over again to the same songs for the rest of their lives, and it's what shapes their musical influences. Now, what that for classical violinists, then of course they're gonna like Beethoven the most for the rest of their lives because that's what they grew up playing, and the canon just reinforces itself in that way. But that's a whole different conversation.
That's a different story.
Yeah, it's a different story. In terms of pop music, that is that function. What I think is cool about new music and how I've been able to really, really dive into that world with ears wide open, creative head on my shoulders, ready to go, and without that judgmental lens that at first I was like, what the heck is this? The first experiences I had with classical music, I was like, what in the world? I mean, contemporary music.
Yeah.
But the exploration of sound is what is driving that music. It's the exploration of close your eyes and remove, detach the instrument from the sounds that you're hearing. What are those sounds, and what does it make you think of? What place are you transported to? And whoa, you did that with your violin. That is crazy. The exploration of sounds, the combination of sounds, each project, each piece that is composed, for the most part, is trying to explore something new, and collectively all of that is moving towards a place of broadening, decolonizing that canon that is so, what is the word? It's so saturated with 200-year-old compositions from people who look pretty much the same and all had similar teachers.
The idea of standing out and creating a new, because let's go back in time and Beethoven.
Yeah.
When Beethoven wrote, I think it was the Ninth Symphony or the Eroica, no one liked it. I mean, people did, but there was a vast majority of audience and critics who thought that was just too much. It was just too harsh.
Yeah.
Whereas now, everybody listens to it. But the people of now think of contemporary music as too experimental.
Yeah.
Right? This is my case. So I'm, for example, I realized that I'm not anymore a great fan of classical music because I've played almost all of it.
Yeah.
And I don't have the same feelings that I have. It feels like I'm talking about a crush.
No.
But it's like I don't have the same feelings that I had for classical music as I now do for jazz.
Yeah.
I thought that I had nothing for jazz. We went to that one concert. Where was it, last Saturday?
And you want to get up and move.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And that is...
It takes so much.
And that is just all your energy. And it sucks your energy.
Yeah.
And I forgot that feeling.
Or puts energy into you and then moves back to the stage. It's this giant energy circle.
Fun story.
Yeah.
Story time. It was, I think, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was here in Longy the first time. I was just a kid. And I was in El Sistema, which is a summer program.
Cool.
That takes place in Longy. Not every year, unfortunately, but I was lucky enough to be there that year.
Yeah.
And we had the opportunity to play with one of the greatest conductors.
Cool.
Gustavo Dudamel.
Yeah.
And we were playing Beethoven Fifth Symphony, and then Harry Potter right after that.
That must have been so fun.
And I remember we were 3 concertmasters that would rotate, and when it was my turn to do Beethoven, because we did more than one concert, one was here, one was at the former White House down the street. There was this moment of magic where he brought up the baton.
Yeah.
Everybody was breathing. And as I breathed, everybody followed me and started. And for a moment, I thought, wow, like I'm in charge of all of this. And that was amazing.
Yeah.
That was just a very special moment in my
Yeah.
life where I said, music has an impact in
Yeah.
people. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't stick with me forever in my case, but
It will.
I thought that that day we made people cry.
Yeah.
Imagine
Yeah.
the ability, the power to touch people's feelings
By all breathing together.
by not only but just by making a really good sound
Oh, yeah.
without having to say one word.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
It is really powerful, especially because language as a communication tool is linearized, packed with biases,
Yes.
packed with metaphors that can come from hatred without even the speaker even like having an awareness of them, and there's a lot of room for miscommunication. Music is just it takes a line of communication, just blows it wide open.
Yes.
Which is room for interpretation. It's room for previous experience with similar sounds. It is room for meaning like that can be gathered from your face as you're playing, and it can be meaning gathered from looking out at the audience and seeing someone like in wonder, and then you're charged again with like keep going, keep like it just explodes the capacity to change how someone is feeling, and that is a power that is talked about a lot. It's like but it's really hard. I don't know if we'll ever be able to articulate really what that power is, but it's like wondrous. And where did we start on this? It was you've lost your love for music.
No, not for music.
Classical music.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
impossible to lose love for music.
Oh, yeah.
Even people who are not necessarily in the musical industry,
Yeah.
they do
Yeah,
still
they
love
love
music.
music.
And they're no less,
Yeah.
But I kind of felt like I wasn't serving the community that I love
Yeah.
enough through
I
music.
think you are.
But I think I can do more. Meaning, I have this feeling, whereas, in a way, and given also the name of Young Leaders Podcast, I think
Yeah.
that I am not made to lead with music, because music is not made to have one person lead.
No.
Music is a force that catches herds of people
Yeah.
and moves them together. If you go to a concert,
Hmm?
you don't have the main listener and then the other listeners. You don't
Yeah.
have the head of the audience and then the audience. You
Yeah.
have the audience.
And that's a beautiful thing. That's a community there.
That's a community there, but I believe that I can give something different in a different way.
Yeah.
Through public speaking, through literature, I don't know.
Yeah.
Through composing.
But yeah, through composing, if you want to make an impact, like a positive impact, change people's lives, studying music now and really investing in listening to all that you can and all of these lectures of these people and where they're coming from and what they're trying to contribute with their musical experiments. Like that's what new contemporary music is. It's like experiments. It's like think a professor who has their PhD. She's read everything on a certain topic, and she writes her own dissertation. That's new material. And then she spends the rest of her life studying it and coming up with new findings on this one topic she's the sole expert on in the world. Think of like new contemporary music as the composer's findings, like their research. Like it's because listening, so much of it is understood by past experiences and past, like influenced by the sounds that you loved as a kid, for example. That new stuff is gonna, get out of here. Like it's gonna sound so, it's not gonna click emotionally. Yeah. So these new experiments they're not necessarily, I mean, yes, they're to be enjoyed now, but really they're paving the way for the future. And you can even hear that in pop music. Like, there's so much now in popular music that was influenced by the classical music that was weird in the past, which is really interesting to hear.
If you listen to the revised version of the Four Seasons of Vivaldi,
Really?
also called The Red Priest,
Yeah.
now it's accepted a lot because people
Yeah.
love this new version. But back then, when Vivaldi wrote the Four Seasons, it was a little bit
Yeah.
scandal.
Isn't that
in a
crazy
way.
to think about?
And this is what I'm really having a hard time understanding. It's because I know that in 2-3 generations from now, atonal music, which by the way is already a thing, has been a thing for over 100 years, is gonna be almost as listening to a perfect triad. You know,
Yeah.
it's just that me as a individual,
Yeah.
I can't catapult myself in the future
Yeah.
as much as
And
understanding
it's
it.
a really hard thing to do because it's removing yourself and your ear as it has been influenced and formed until like this moment right now. It's taking that and saying, yes, and like, yes, I understand this is what I like, but suddenly this is interesting. This is interesting. And I think you can only really do that if you've completely internalized the fact that it is the footsteps for the future, like the
Yeah.
ground that we will walk on in the future. These experiments, these like new pieces, experimenting with sounds, experimenting. And it's also, a lot of it is to free music from the confines, from being confined in that
Borders. You can
yeah, the rigid space of the triad.
Again, but
I
you
love
create your own
triads.
borders.
Okay, I love triads. I'm telling you.
But you create your. I mean, you as an individual in general. This is the point. The borders are created by yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you're born, you're not born with the mentality that there is a limit to things.
Yeah.
You think that the world is limitless.
Yeah.
It is growing up and understanding that there are limits.
Yeah.
There are lines you cannot cross.
Yeah.
But sometimes it goes to such a level where you become close-minded.
Yeah.
For example, another example that has nothing to do with music but explains that in society, in this world, this is a real problem. There are countries that don't accept LGBTQ communities.
Yeah.
Why? Because from generations they were born in a country or in societies where they were just taught as a dogma. You know what's a dogma,
Yeah.
right? As a dogma, that it is wrong.
Yeah.
Or that there is a race in humanity, whereas there is just one race, the human race.
Yeah.
So this also explains itself in a way less heavy way in music. Because when I'm born, I'm brought to believe that classical music is the way to go, whereas it's not. It's really not, because back then they didn't call it classical music.
Nope.
Guess what they called it?
Concert music? What they call it?
They call it innovation. They call it
Oh, yeah.
they call it experimenting.
Yeah.
Back then, that's what it really was.
And then it was like used against people. That's the other thing about popular music. Popular music has always been, I mean, I don't know about it in this like commodified world. I mean, I guess things have been commodified for as long as time. But popular music is music of the people. Like, it originates
Pop.
from people, the populace.
Yes.
Like, and you go back all these years and it's like, it's used as a community builder. And this ivory tower that we have where like 3 men stand at the top and will never be taken down from their ivory tower. That is, I mean, those two can influence each other, of course, but that are recorded history and the fact that they have been so preserved as like the best of the best of the best of the best. It's not true, and it doesn't stand for like, it doesn't stand for music.
All right, so unfortunately we need to wrap this up, but I want to ask you a last special question. What we do in this podcast is we ask our interviewee to ask a question to the next interviewee.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask a question from the previous person, and then I'm going to ask you to look in the camera and ask a question for the next person.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to try to word it in a more clear way because it's a very difficult question. The question is, how do you use your imagination in your craft, in what you do? I mean, you're a composer, so it does require. This is why it's
It's
like
a good question.
it's a big question.
Yeah.
But in a very like in a like a little bit more of a summary, how would you? No, because I don't want you to feel pressured to have to
Yeah.
answer all that. But how do you
Oh, yeah.
how do you how do you do that? If you do that.
Yeah. Well, I feel very lucky to have an imagination that is pretty vocal. Like, I mean, it's pretty auditory. And so hearing that things will sound good, like broadening my, like literally broadening the imagination of a piece and a sound, like letting my imagination do some of the work. That's number one. That is, openness to that is something I'm really grateful for. Number two, as we've been talking about, I think it is an imagination that allows people to feel like they are on the right track when they choose to do something as bold as pursue music in this world of capitalism.
Because capitalism. I love this podcast.
Yeah, it is fun.
Jesus, I love it. But yeah, okay. Well, that explains it pretty well. That
Yeah.
explains it very well. So basically, what you're trying to tell us is to be as free as you can and true to yourself in the best way, because that's the portal to the connection between what you do and the imagination.
Yeah. Like having the imagination, being able to imagine 1,000 different scenarios and of what you could do and be successful at, and then being able to really curate the one that you want the most, I think is totally a tool that is like in your imagination that is not possible without the imagination. Like
Definitely.
to be like, okay, these are the things that are possible for me and more. But I like this one and I can see it going further. And I'm going to live every day as
Believing in it.
Yeah, as if I'm in that world.
Like this project.
Yeah. No, exactly. Seriously. I think that is like Imagination City.
All right. So, last thing is you gotta look at that camera and ask the next person a question.
How's your day? I'm just kidding. I can't think of one.
Take your time.
Thank you. First of all, I love you.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. It's not ASMR.
I know I can't think of anything. Let me see. Do you know who the next person's gonna be?
Yes, but I can't tell you.
Oh.
And I can't even tell you who asked you the question. That's a nice thing.
That is kind of fun.
It's hard though. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like out of the blue.
Yeah. I don't want to ask someone about like, what's your practice routine? Like,
You can ask them literally
No.
anything. Like anything that's like swarming around your mind. You can
Yeah.
just word vomit. Remember? We had that talk about
Yeah,
word
word
vomiting. Word vomit. To the camera.
What do you stand for? What do you stand for? What do you stand up for to represent?
What do you fight for?
What do you fight for?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Thanks, I took it from DBR.
This is actually a really good question because it can actually open up a podcast.
Yeah.
Out of
You can start
nowhere.
with it.
No, I always start with the question of.
Yeah. That's good.
But that is actually a really good starting question. I have
What
to
do you
debate that.
stand for, and how do you weave that into your daily life and practice?
Wow.
and your relationships and your kinship with the world around you.
I'm going to have to remember that by heart. That's going to be hard. No, but yeah, don't worry. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for being a
The
young
crew
leader.
thanks you. And
Crew, you guys, you really.
But yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And
Thanks for having me.
there's going to be much more coming. I swear.
Many young leaders.
There are going to be a lot of people here talking. Especially from next semester.
Yeah.
Talking. We should start an ASMR channel.
Maybe. We might make people feel uncomfortable.
Jesus.